Thinking about leaving your soul sucking 9 to 5 job? One of the biggest struggles I see people, especially as women, face is the idea of having that safety net, that enticing perks and benefits, and listening to that head trash of what will people think if I leave. I totally get it, and I've been where you are. That's why I created a free guide to help you if you're thinking about putting in that notice. It's called Unlocking Your Exit Plan. Discover 5 things you need to do before leaving your 9 to 5. This guide is filled with worksheets and steps so you will have hand holding along the way. You can download your copy in the link in the show notes, and again, it's totally free. Now back to today's episode. Hey there, let's face it. Today's internet world is so saturated and everyone is fighting for that number one spot to be visible. It is no longer about running ads and having thousands of people on your email list. It is about building relationships and networking with others to grow your business and become visible. Hi, my name is Candace. I'm a podcast launch strategist and I help service-based business owners develop and deliver their message to the world by using platforms like podcasting and bringing valuable content to those who need to hear what they have to say. Welcome to the Hello C.S. Dorsey Podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Hello C.S. Dorsey Podcast. I have Shivawn on the podcast today. Shivawn, how are you doing?
I'm great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. So can you tell everyone who you are and what you do?
Yes. So as she already said, I'm Shivawn Mitchell. I am a creative communicator. That's not how I started out. I actually went to school for my undergrad in counseling, and then I made this super big pivot and went back for my master's in filmmaking, specifically screenwriting. And from there, I've gone on to start a production company and also work on some projects for PBS, Essence. And also I have established a team, and we also do our own producing and original content. So it's been a drastic shift, but it kind of all makes sense.
Drastic is an understatement because those are some big names. Oh my goodness. We'll talk about that in a moment, but like, what was it like for you, like working for those big name companies?
So the benefit of having a production company is you're able to get contracted out for specific individuals. So I don't want people to assume that I worked for those companies, but I co-produced a project on PBS where we featured a young lady who came from Africa to America with $5 to her name and has gone on to be a successful business owner, actually of 2 businesses. And we just covered her journey. And for Essence, I recently did a project for them for the Essence Festival for an individual where she is the first Black minimalist that's notable. So we covered her story of why this was important to her. So that's the benefit of having a production company and being sought after. So that's something I'm thankful for.
That's awesome. That sounds really awesome and fun too.
It is. It's actually very fun. You get to meet some really unique individuals. So I love that.
That's awesome. So let's talk about the inspiration behind you starting your business. What was that like for you?
So actually I had this this moment where I was at my 9 to 5 at that time at a counseling agency. And I just remember feeling unfulfilled. And I went to one of the people that were on staff and I was just like, I don't know what to do. And he was like, just take a leap. Like, what's the worst thing that can happen is you fail. He was like, it's okay. So the next day I actually went to church and it was a young lady that I knew, and she was telling me about a program she was in, and she was actually going for something different than filmmaking. But the benefit was that I was able to work still, and I only went away each quarter on campus. But while I was there, I actually had this moment where I felt like out of place. And I know people have heard of imposter syndrome, but I was one of the few brown girls there. And then I also am a believer. And that's just something that's contrary. I'm not going to say contrary, but people don't talk about it often in the entertainment or film industry. And I just remember making myself a promise that I was going to help as many people, and specifically at that time, women, tell their stories, because that was my thing. I knew I wanted to tell stories, but I wasn't equipped. And I said I was going to equip as many as people as I could to tell their story. And that literally is how I started off on this journey and then established my own production company. So it was from that moment.
I love it because you set out to do something that was selfless. You know, you wanted to help other people and the door opened up. And I think that's so beautiful. I love how your focus was to help people, help women tell their story. And then just, I mean, of course, you know, things will come up, you know, we have ups and downs while we're going through the journey, I should say. But you know, God have a way of definitely opening up doors. You know, when you are thinking when it comes to others and His people. So I think that's really beautiful.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I will tell people I have done a whole lot of crying in between then and now, but it's been worth it. And from that, I also started a nonprofit. It's called the Creative Outsiders. So as much as I've helped other people, it's helped me because I've established so many relationships, from being out there and encouraging people. It's actually how I found one of my team members. We literally met on Instagram. So it's definitely been a blessing, because I never would have thought this is the way that I would have gone ever.
I love it. So beautiful. So you touched a little bit on your hello moment, but was there a time while you were actually starting your business or working in your business where you had a hello moment, like you're like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing? Because sometimes we start things and then we don't know if this is what we're supposed to be doing, and we keep going through the motions and going through it and going through it, and we're like, wait a minute, am I supposed to be doing this? So could you talk about that time where you had like, okay, yeah, hello, this is what I'm supposed to be doing?
I think it's when I first started the Creative Outsiders. And when I originally started it, I had a co-founder. And we started the journey out together. And I just remember having this fuel where I was like, okay, we can keep going. Okay, let's keep sharing information. And then I was like, let's start a podcast. And this was like probably 4 years ago. And I just remember she making a decision that it was too much and me saying, but I can do it. It's okay. And I think it's the response that I started getting from people when I started to share more stories of women in film. And I just remember somebody coming back to me and saying, thank you so much. From this, I decided to do my short film. And I was like, oh God, like I might be getting this right. I might be doing this right. And it was in that moment where it was like, okay, I can't give up because there are people who need to see this and we need to see the encouragement. So I definitely think it was seeing fruit from it, that people were actually taking what I said or the encouragement that I provided and they were going and doing the work.
That is so awesome. Yes, yes, I love it when I hear like just one person say, "Hey, I like this," or "I'm working
Mm-hmm.
on this," or "I heard when you said XYZ and I'm actually doing it." That just like it's like, oh, okay, okay. I know what I can keep going now.
Right.
Oh
Right.
my goodness. I love it so much. So let's talk about how to show up and creatively communicate effectively in media and entertainment while being led by your faith. Can you talk more about that?
Yes, it's my favorite thing to talk about now. So um I literally tell people it's so many things to unpack. So, first thing about creatively communicating and media and entertainment, people hear that and be like, that doesn't apply to me. But any space that you show up, whether it's social media or your website, or if you do want to create a short film, or if you want to start a podcast or write a book, we have the responsibility to communicate effectively. And a lot of times we aren't able to do that because we're trying to emulate other people. We don't see the value in our words. I'm famous for saying use your words because we all live life and we all have this unique story to tell. But what happens is we subscribe to having to do it the same way that everybody else does because we're pursuing success rather pursuing our purpose. And we get caught up. Like I see it in social media so much. It's like, okay, if I do this, then I'm gonna have a million views. Or if I write this story, then people are going to respond. But this is where our faith part comes in. It's like, have I sat down with a guy and asked him what's on his heart? And I gave this example the other day when I was doing a conference. Um, we're supposed to fill the gap as his kids, as believers. So we're missing out on telling stories because there's been this narrative, and I'm not anti-church, so I want y'all to hear my heart. The church has told us that like we can only create this way, but we're missing out on reaching so many people because we're not filling in the gap. So during the height of the pandemic, our production company had to change and we had to switch our production to live online. And like we were all scrambling like everybody else, but we knew we wanted to one, have a conversation about relationships, and we wanted to do it unique. So we did a cooking show. And I think we discount that because like I know growing up, I used to be in the kitchen with my mom or my granny, and I would be watching them. And like God is like, I'm concerned about that too. Like I want y'all to be in relationship. And I think a very good testament of that, and I don't know if people have seen it, is the film. And it has nothing like, he doesn't mention God. It's not a faith-based film, but the movie that Kevin Hart was in, Fatherhood. And God was like, I want you to watch this. And I want you to see that, like, I want men to be depicted as men, like that they show up for their families, that they are concerned about their kids, that they will go over and beyond to be present. And like God was like, I want that to be shown in media. So to me, that's what creatively communicating looks like, as even our faith is going to God first and saying, God, what's on your heart? And then how do we tell this story? And how do I tell it true to who I am, my experiences? Because that's where he breathes on it. That's where you get the views, because you're doing what God said in a unique way and you don't have to copy anybody else. And I know I said a lot.
No, this is good. This is really important because we follow those influencers online and they're getting success, and they're doing their digital marketing, online marketing, and they, making all this money. They teach how they do it. Some people will have success with doing it their way, but eventually they'll find themselves later on tweaking it and doing it their way and still finding that it's successful. So, it's fine. I feel like find your own way first and do what works for you, what comes to your heart. I think what you touched on is really wonderful and really beautiful because we kind of get lost and we kind of emulate a lot of people, and it's the truth. Yes. And I see it all the time, and I'm like scrolling through my Instagram or I'm scrolling through Facebook, and I'm like, I've seen this before. Everybody's doing the same thing, like, is somebody doing something different? And I'm always constantly thinking to myself, what can I do different that nobody has thought of or haven't leveraged, So
right.
You constantly have to be in prayer. You constantly have to be thinking those things, what set you apart. And not be like, everyone else, because trust me, you're going to be disappointed when, that sale didn't come through. Well, I followed the recipe and I did this.
Right.
It may not be for you, So I'm really happy you touched on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think too, because, there are, even when you're in business or you're building a business, there are things that are just standard, right? So we're building a foundation and there's things that you need to do to establish a healthy business. But I think what we miss out on the creativity part is like, like God is the ultimate creator. So surely has a fresh idea for you. But what our issue is, and I'm speaking from experience, is that we have subscribed to the world's way, and God is saying, like, you don't have to, and don't, you do have to be disciplined and you do have to do the work, but we don't have to hustle. Like, he has the answers, but it feels weird because we haven't been practicing it. So to say, I'm going to go to him first, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to say, okay, guys, you gave me this idea. So now give me the strategy. And that's realistic because we see it like with Solomon. Solomon went to build all of these things that God told him to build, but God gave him very specific instructions. And I think that it feels out of place to go and say, okay, God, okay, what is your strategy? But like he said, he's concerned about what we're concerned about, and we can ask him anything. So I don't want people to think that like you can just wing it in business. No, like even in that, God will be like, okay, maybe you do need to go back to school, or maybe you do need to hire somebody who's already established a business or went to school for screenwriting or whatever it may be in your instance. But then you say, okay, I've gotten the education, or I've gotten the instruction. So now, God, how do I uh, make this unique? Because we're all unique. We all have different experiences. So, yeah.
Yes, yes. When you talked about Solomon, that temple was yeah, very detailed. And so was
Yes.
the tabernacle as well in the Old Testament. Each piece represented something and it was unique, and it was supposed to be constructed a certain way. You had to use certain type of wood, you had to use a certain type of um skin for the covering. And my pastor, she we had to study this for months and months and months on the tabernacle. But you're right, there's certain, if you go to God, he will give you the strategy behind building something or constructing something. And each piece and each component is specific, and it's is has a meaning behind each little small piece. So
Absolutely.
yes, yes. Oh, I can talk on and on about this. You got me going here. All right. So any last minute advice you have for our listeners out there?
Oh, last minute advice. I would say the first thing, my biggest thing is, because this is the counselor in me, is because you can be creative, you can have all the stories, but if you first don't do the work on yourselves, it's you're going to struggle. Because that's when like we compare and we don't deal with rejection, and we're not sure in who God says we are. And that is why we compare. So I would say, before you branch out, before you decide to step out in any business space, like really go to God first and ask him who you are, and like why did he create you, and what are your gifts and talents? Because then you don't rely on somebody else to tell you who you are. And don't get me wrong, God would send people to reaffirm what he's already said, but you're not dependent on them to tell you who you are, because it's the same thing. You don't want to be moved by people's applause or criticism. And that comes from being rooted in who God says you are. So that would be my advice.
That's awesome. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. So where can everyone find you?
So you can go to my personal website. It is www.shivawnmitchell.com, or you can go to www.thecreativeoutsiders with an s.com. You can find me on Instagram at Shivawn Mitchell and at The Creative Outsiders.
Awesome. And we will definitely link those up in the show notes so everyone can click on those links and contact you directly if they have any questions or want to view your website. So thank you so much, Shivawn, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Did you like today's episode? I hope you did. Join me next week for more valuable bombs, tips, and tricks on how to grow your business by taking action. If you like this podcast, subscribe and leave us a review, or take a snapshot of this episode and tag me on Instagram at csdorsey_hello. We would love to hear from you.